thought you were going to make me watch.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that to you. Let you know what it's like.
Yeah.
What'd you name it?
What did I name what?
What'd you name your cat? Oh.
My cat? My cat?
Sits beside you.
That sits beside you in the morning for Bible study.
Let me tell you something. That cat adopted me. I did not adopt that
Yes.
cat. Okay, we are thankful for your attendance tonight. We are in Revelation chapter 21. If you would open your Bibles there. We are about halfway through the chapter. We're going to pick up with about verse 15 in just a moment. Before we get into the lesson, let's bow for an opening in prayer. Roger, would you lead us in that prayer, please?
Father, thank you for tonight. We've been able to come to open up the Word, Father, which we need on a daily basis. We might glean from it what we need this very night. Pray that you be with all teachers, Father, as we prepare. Father, be today as we direct our minds this evening. Father, we pray for all those who have sick. You know those ones, you know their needs, you know their hearts. Pray that you'll reach out with healing hand to those this very hour. Father, continue to be with the world. You know, Father, it's just in a terrible shape. Pray that you will be with all the leaders of all countries. Father, bless them in their endeavors and in their decisions, Father, that might benefit the church, especially. In the blessed name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. All right, we've been looking at this chapter for a couple of weeks now. It starts off with, again, another vision. This vision is, again, coming down out of heaven, is this symbolic representation of the New Jerusalem. Today we're going to see the dimensions, measurements of that, and understand again this is a symbolic representation. The heaven, by this time, the earth and the surrounding atmosphere have been destroyed. The planets have been destroyed. They've been burned up. They don't exist anymore. So what is this New Jerusalem? Again, we've been talking about this. It's described as the bride in the first 14 verses here. It's described as the bride of Christ. It's described as containing all of those who have been faithful to God. The unfaithful are not allowed in. So again, my interpretation is that this New Jerusalem is a representative body of people that are going to be in heaven. And who is that body? That body is the church. So the bride is represented by this image of this New Jerusalem. Now, there are several interesting things about this New Jerusalem that we're going to get into. One of the things I want to bring up, and we've already done so to a certain extent, the idea that Ezekiel sees in the book of Ezekiel. A lot of what we see in chapter 21, if we go back to the book of Ezekiel, which again, the book of Ezekiel is the same type of writing, the same this same symbolic picture that's being represented. What's interesting is that Ezekiel describes a temple. Now, the interesting thing about that temple is it never existed physically any place ever. It is not the the temple that was built by Solomon. That temple was destroyed by the Babylonians. Whenever the by the way, Ezekiel is in Babylonian captivity. Whenever he sees this vision of this temple and their return back to Judah, but then he describes this temple, and this temple is not the one that was built by Solomon. It's not the one that's going to be rebuilt whenever the children of Israel return back to Judah, and it's not the one that later is described as Herod's temple, which is the one that we are probably familiar with. Jesus going into the temple, it would have been the one built by Herod. So there are three physical structures that were in Jerusalem that were described as the temple, but none of them are what Ezekiel sees. And as he describes this temple, we say, well, what is the meaning behind that? I don't think we can really understand the meaning of Ezekiel's temple without contemplating and looking at what we're seeing here in the New Jerusalem. Now, in a couple of verses on down, I'm going to just jump ahead for just a moment, down to verse 22, and I saw no temple in the city. Well, that's interesting. Here is the New Jerusalem, if you will, the heart of Jesus, the bride of Jesus, but there is no temple in this city. And in fact, it is described as being the entire description of the New Jerusalem is the temple. All right, so this is not going to be describing a temple that, again, we would recognize. It is not like Ezekiel's temple, but yet it is symbolic in its nature. And as we go through, maybe we can get some of this symbolism to come out for us. One of the first things we see in verse 15, and the one who spoke with me had a measuring rod of gold to measure the city and its gates and walls. Now remember, as we open up the 40th chapter of the book of Ezekiel, we see something of the same picture. Ezekiel sees a man carrying a measuring reed, a measuring rod. Not gold, by the way, just a regular stick. And it's a certain length, and therefore you can use it in repetition to determine how big something is. So Ezekiel is told that he is going to be measuring the walls around the temple. He's to measure the court of the temple. He's to measure everything about this temple. And again, as you look at it and you see it described, it does not represent anything that was ever physically built. So we're talking about two spiritual representations of the temple. And I might even go on to say there's a third representation that Paul talks about whenever he addresses the church in Corinth. He says that individual Christians are the temple, that our body is the temple, but also in a more congregational idea, the church is the temple. I believe, maybe I'm wrong, but I believe Ezekiel's picture of a temple is spiritual. Paul's depiction of the church being the temple is spiritual in nature. And again, we carry that over into this picture in this New Jerusalem, where there's not a physical temple, because it says John doesn't see a temple in the New Jerusalem. Why? It's spiritual in nature. We don't need a temple. The entire city is the temple. It's not just a part of the city. The entire city is symbolically represented as a temple of God. Keeping in mind what was the temple to symbolize? It was to symbolize the presence of the name of God in Jerusalem. We don't need a symbolic representation of the temple. Why? Because God lives here. This is part of heaven. Again, this is not all of heaven. Again, I think there are too many commentaries that want to make the New Jerusalem all of heaven. I think we have to limit its scope with the church. This is not saying only the people of the church are going to be saved, but I think he's not describing Abraham and Isaac and Moses and all the faithful that have gone on before. They're in heaven, fine, but not in this part of heaven. This part of heaven describes those who have been purchased by the blood of Christ, the church. And because of that, now we have this representation of the concept that the entire city symbolizes the temple of God. Okay, we'll get to that a little bit more. Let's go back here now to John has been given this rod of gold to measure the city. In verse 16, the city lies four square. There's a song that we sing every once in a while. It describes that idea. There's a city that is four square, and it is. And if you don't don't read the book of Revelation, you're not going to understand the concept of that song. Yes.
You said John had the rod of gold. Read it, gold.
Well, again, I don't think it's a literal piece of gold.
Well, I mean, but John is, and he who talked with me had a gold reed in to measure the city.
Yes.
So what John did.
Well, the angel brings it to John. John's given the instructions to measure the city. All right. So again, keeping in mind, whenever we see something that is physical, this is the book of Revelation. By this period of time, if we're looking at this being at the end of the age that Jesus talked about, then the earth has been destroyed. There is no more earth. There is no more atmosphere. There are no more planets. It's all gone. The physical is gone. The spiritual remains. And because of that, now we have to understand, okay, we have a city. We're described having physical walls. We've looked at the gates to a certain extent. We looked at the foundation of the walls. That's all physical. At least, and as we think about these things, there are physical entities. But John is not describing a physical place. He is talking about a spiritual place, a part of heaven. And because it is spiritual, we have to understand, okay, these are symbolic. What do they mean? Okay, the city is four square. Same height, same width, same length, same depth. It's a cube, perfect cube shape. Now, as we look at the dimensions, and again, we're not going to spend a lot of time here. Its length, the same as width, it is measured as he measured the city with his rod, 12,000 stadia. Its length and width and height are equal. He also measured its wall, 144 cubits by human measurement, which is also an angel's measurement. Now, what that means, I've got no idea. It is, and it may, well, I'm not going to speculate. All right, first of all, what is a cubit? A cubit is roughly 18 inches. Take your elbow to the tip of your middle finger. If you measure that, that's just about 18 inches. And it usually is determined by who is the king at the present time. You get a tall guy, the cubit becomes a little bigger. You get a short guy, the cubit becomes a little bit smaller. Why? Because the king's arm becomes a standard in the idea of measurement. So whenever we hear certain terms, we have to take it with a grain of salt. Cubit is a rough measurement, but roughly it is the distance from your elbow to your finger. Sometimes I don't carry a measuring stick out whenever I am cutting firewood, but I know in my firebox that's the length. I cut it right there, 1 cubit, and it fits nicely in my firebox. Just about 2 inches longer, and I can't get my door closed in my firebox. So I gotta keep a pretty close standard in my measurement. So that becomes my. I use the cubit as a measurement when I'm measuring firewood. Every once in a while, you get one that's an inch or so longer, an inch or so shorter, but I try to keep it just about that. That's a lot easier for stacking and so on. So a cubit, keeping in mind, is not an absolute standard. In other words, you take out, again, I hate to say this, but even our modern tape rules and measures and so on. I saw a video one time, and they put 2 rulers side by side, 2 different companies, 2 different brands. They put them side by side, and they went out about 12 or 14 inches, and they were already off by about 3/4 of an inch in that short distance. So how in the world can they get that far off? Who knows? I don't know. But so when we're looking at, people want to be precise and accurate, and that's not what we're dealing with here. Notice the numbers, by the way. They are multiples of 12. 144, 12 times 12. 12,000 stadia, 12 times 1,000. Again, keeping in mind, numbers in the book of Revelation are truly symbolic in nature, and they mean something. Usually the number 12 is a combination of 2 numbers, and that is 3 times 4. And it is considered a perfect number. All right, there are several numbers that are considered perfect numbers. Number 7. We see that frequently in the book of Revelation. The number 12 is a complete number. Think about the 12 tribes of Israel. Think about the 12 apostles, 12 foundations, 12 gates. It's a symbolism of a perfect number. The number 10 is a complete number. Now, complete in what sense? It is, it's not exactly 10 as we count 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 10, but it is a complete number. You get to 10, you say, okay, that's complete. It's done. All right. Notice incomplete numbers. 3.5 years. All right, we see that quite a bit, and also in the book of Daniel. The number 3.5 is an incomplete number. It's not usually considered a large number, as a number 10, if you would, something of that nature. So we have these numbers which are symbolic. Notice in the description, we don't have any representations of 3.5, this imprecise number. These are all standard, complete, whole, perfect numbers. Meaning what? Jerusalem is a perfect place. This New Jerusalem has been laid out perfectly by God. It has the perfect number of entrances. It has the perfect number of foundations. It has the perfect height of the walls for protection. Understand, 144 cubits. That's a tall wall. What is the idea of a wall? Protection. You are protecting. And again, what do we need protected from? You say there shouldn't be anything bothering us in heaven. But the point of it is, in the wildest imagination, if there was something bad outside these walls. There is no way possible for it to get over these walls and into the city. We looked last week about the 12 gates. Standing beside each gate is an angel. All right. Again, that is not just a haphazard or just nice to have an angel standing there. It's not like a butler or a doorman in a motel or hotel and you might be attending. The angel, as we often see, is a being of protection. Nothing is coming through that gate that has no business being there. What's outside the gate? Go back to verses about verse 8, verse 7, 8. The sexually immoral, the liars, the cowards, all of those are outside the walls of the city. They are not coming in. So again, the angels are there to protect anybody coming through the gates or anything coming through the gates. We have the walls as a height factor that nobody's climbing over these walls. It's not happening. You're not getting in if you're not supposed to be there. All right, again, the idea of the protection of God. We don't have to, and again, all the passages in the Bible, and again, we're going through the book of 2 Chronicles right now. And again, when God was with the people it made no difference how many people were on Israel's side. If God said, I'll be with you in this battle, it could be only you. But you're going to win the battle. Why? Because God said he's going to be with you. Likewise, if God said, don't go to battle, don't do this, and you try to do it, and you displease God, you could forfeit your own life. You could end up losing the entire battle, the entire war. The idea is this is God's protected place, and we have no fears at all, or should have absolutely no fear whatsoever. All right, and anybody comments about that? Yeah, Roger.
Let's talk about when we're in heaven. We're not going to have this physical body anyway. It's going to be changed. Now, I don't know how much we're going to be spirit. And I don't know how much we're going to have of our mind's memory. You see what I'm getting at? But God has already told us he's going to be there to protect us. So why should we be, if you want to put it in parentheses, scared, of anything?
Yep.
Because we're going to be changed.
By the way, is this information that John is giving now, is it for the people that are entering heaven? Who is this information for? It's the people right now that the 7 churches of Asia and the ones that John's writing to. Why? Because they are in the heat of this battle against Rome, seemingly an impossible force to deal with. But yet here we see at the conclusion of everything, however many years it is until the end of time, it's not important. As long as we remain faithful, God is in control. God is going to protect me. I am going to be in this city that I don't have to worry about anything ever again. We'll talk about some of the things that we don't have to worry about. Again, that are described as physical entities, but they're not. They're spirit. It's a spiritual concept. All right. Anybody else? Again, I'm not going to go through all of this, but the wall was built of jasper. The city was pure gold, clear as glass. I do not know. I've never seen clear gold, but something described here as being very, again, what is the idea? Very valuable, but yet it's transparent. I can see through it. Again, what might be a symbolic idea along that line? I don't know, just maybe the view that we're not blocked by a solid wall. Again, by the way, that's depressing. Dave was talking about he spent a little bit of time in a psychiatric unit, not not as a patient. But as, I had to put that in there. Now, else Karen, I wouldn't have said that. But he was in there observing, and just depressing, I think is the word that he used to describe it. Being in being in an enclosure where you can't see anything on the outside. Even this room is somewhat depressing to our way of thinking. We'd love to see things out around about us, but it is closed in. It is closed in. Jails, just they're depressing. Don't go to jail. That's the idea. So this is not a depressing picture. It's a very beautiful picture. Walls and the walls of jasper and a clear gold. That it's not depressing. It's going to let the light in, and it's a very beautiful picture. Again, we see the foundations adorned with every kind of jewel, and again, we're not going to go through those. Simply to say, let me also include, along with the foundation and the wall, the 12 gates in verse 21 are said to be 12 pearls, each of the gates made of a single pearl. And the street of the city was gold, of pure gold, transparent as glass. All right, several descriptions that we have heard in our lifetime were the pearly gates. And usually when you see a picture of the pearly gates, it's, these open bars made of a pearl-like substance. It's not what it's describing. It's describing the gate, the entire gate is a pearl. Now think about that. First of all, I'm not a collector of pearls, but the Bible talks about there was a seller of pearls, and he found this pearl of great price. Think about these. 12 pearls make up the gates. They're large enough for people to pass through. Think about the value that is represented by a pearl of that size. Again, are they physical pearls? It's a spiritual concept here. It is a extremely valuable place. You see, rich people having their faucets and their bathtubs and everything covered in gold. It's pretty. I don't know how functional that would be, but it's pretty. They want to stress how rich they are, and so they make things out of gold that we normally wouldn't think are being made out of gold. They're in the streets, again, paved with gold. There's a funny story about a man who was trying to get through the pearly gates, and he's trying to bribe the person at the gate. He said, "Here, I got this trunk full of gold, or a trunk full of something that's very valuable. I'll give you if you let me in." And they open up the trunk, and it's full of gold. And and the person standing at the gate says, "Why are you offering me paving material for?" That's the idea. Here is something that this person's valued. He's got a treasure chest full of gold, and it means nothing. Remember the description of the wealth of Solomon? Everything in Solomon's house was gold. The shields that he had for the soldiers, gold. The plates that he ate on, gold. Everything was gold. In fact, it says nothing was made of silver because it was just so common in the time of Solomon that it was almost like paving material. It was just, you wouldn't think about putting silver in the house of Solomon. All right, these pictures that we know happened on the earth are now trying to give us a glimpse of this beautiful place called heaven. That, that wherever you look, it's just absolute beauty. The value is beyond price. The protection